the idea of crushing the grape in its original state, it would only last one season. It would rot on the vine. But if you crush it and let it ferment, it would last for hundreds of years. And there's something that happens to us when we are crushed that gives us resilience and tenacity that we wouldn't have. It is the thing that opposes you in the weight room that causes you to build muscles. You know, the resistance training, you know. I don't need the weights to cooperate. I need them to resist me. So when life resists you, you get stronger. I was born June 9th, 1957. I am my mother's youngest living child. She had a child after me that died and a child before me that died. I was born between two dead children. I was the only one that lived out of those three. I have two older siblings. And I grew up in a house with a father who had kidney failure, who got sick when I was 10 and died when I was 16. Those atrocious, sad, challenging circumstances have so much to do with who I am as a person. You know, if I had not, she wouldn't have raised me the way she raised me if she wasn't grieving as she raised me, if she wasn't clinging to me as she raised me. I wouldn't be a caretaker if I hadn't grown up in a house with a kidney machine. I could run a kidney machine and couldn't ride a bike. So this whole notion of taking care of hurting people is in my DNA.
My goodness.
Yeah, it goes all the way back to my childhood, climbing up on a hospital bed to shave my father when he was sick, or clean him up or dress him or whatever. And so as I sit here today with a ministry to hurting people, it's only fitting that I would write a book called Crushing, because I have been crushed. You know, life is crushing. Periodically, it's necessary. Christ was crushed. Grapes are crushed in order to become wine, and the goal is the wine. The goal is, what do you have left, not what did you lose? And learning how to look to what is before you. The Bible said he despised the shame of the cross, but for the joy that was set before him, he endured the crushing because he knew the crushing was going somewhere. And I wrote that book to people who have been crushed, who are being crushed, not just physically, not just death, not just COVID-19, though that is a horrible thing we should talk about, but crushed in their heart. You know, if I cut my leg, I can get some medication for it, and I can take some pain medicine for it. If I stump my toe, I can get something and Band-Aid it up and put some painkiller on it, and I'll be fine. If I break my heart, there's nothing to take for it. And so many Americans are suffering from broken hearts, from family issues, from parental issues, from domestic issues, from family issues, and we have to paint a happy face on because we're Christians. And this is the way we look. We're Christians, you know, with our crosses around our neck, never knowing that our crosses are in our lives. Jesus made the toughest altar call that's ever been made. We make altar calls today. God will turn your life around. I don't care how low you are, he'll pick you up. He'll get you together again. If you come to Jesus right now, he'll heal your marriage. He'll bring you through. That's not the altar call Jesus made. Jesus made this altar call. Pick up your cross and follow me. What? Who wants to pick up an instrument of death and cruelty and follow you to a cross? And yet thousands of people followed him. What did Jesus know about crushing that made thousands of people almost faint in the desert without food to hear him deliver a message about take up your cross and follow me? This to me is the epitome of the Christian marriage, that he takes 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And we know, we have an accountant's record of what it is until he crushes it. The more he crushes it, the more it multiplies. And all of a sudden, what was accountable is 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and we have absolute metrics on what it was in the bag. The more he crushed it, it fit thousands and thousands of people and 12 baskets full left. That's what crushing does in our lives. It multiplies us, it increases us, it builds us up, and it makes us more than we would be had we had sat in the lap of luxury and had everything go well.
Okay, let me see if I understand so far. So bad is good.
Yeah, it was good for me that I have been afflicted. The more they afflicted them, the more they grew. You're only strong because of the weight that's been put on you.
Right.
You wouldn't be the man that you are today if you hadn't suffered and endured and agonized and put up with stuff and went home and beat the wall and cried in a pillow to stand up to be who you are. People see you on stage and they think, oh, you're Matt Crouch, you're Paul's son. You've always had it good. Nobody has it good. I don't care where you live or what you drive. Nobody makes it through this life without pain. The call to take up the cross doesn't stop with a zip code.
Right.
It's a universal call from a God who was able to stop the cross, but allowed it to continue because redemption came through it.
Help us understand that unique dichotomy of what God's doing with this crushing. It's a real tough thing to explain, and I want to hear you.
First of all, I learned is never try to make sense of it while you're in it.
Okay.
You have to focus on surviving it, not understanding it. Because the crushing is so intense and so personal and so deep that you only understand in retrospect. When you look back at it, you say it was good for me. It's over now. It was good. Well, not while you're in it, but after you're through with it, it was good for me that I've been afflicted. The idea of crushing the grape in its original state, it would only last one season. It would rot on the vine. But if you crush it and let it ferment, it would last for hundreds of years.
My goodness.
And there's something that happens to us when we are crushed that gives us resilience and tenacity that we wouldn't have. I was writing on that legal pad, and the Lord showed me a vision of people stomping on grapes. And then took me to the text that the seed of the woman would bruise the head of the serpent, and the serpent would bruise his heel. And when I saw Christ's bruised heel, they looked like the heels of somebody who'd been stomping on grapes. And I started to realize that on the cross, he stomped on everything that was against me. He moved every obstacle that was contrary to me. And that even though I go through things now, that he has borne the grief and carried the sorrows of it. He went before me to lighten the load of it and still suffered me to go through it. And I'll tell you why. What we don't realize is that it is exactly the pain we had that made us who we are.
My goodness.
It is exactly the neglect or the absence or I am so grateful for the teacher that said I couldn't write because that's why I could. It is the thing that opposes you in the weight room that causes you to build muscles.
There it is.
The resistance training. I don't need the weights to cooperate. I need them to resist me.
My goodness.
So when life resists you, you get stronger and you get wiser and you turn into something that can be kept and that will last. And I think it's so important when you talk about the suffering church in the book of Revelations at Smyrna, and he talks about frankincense and myrrh, the incense was roots that were crushed, and the aroma only escaped as the roots were being crushed. And there is an aroma that escapes your heart when you're crushed. People who have not been crushed cannot access their emotions well.
Wow.
They cannot verbalize or enunciate feelings well, and sometimes it's dangerous to give power to people who have no empathy. What we need is somebody who can be touched. That's why Christ came, so that he could be touched by the feeling of our infirmity. Look at Jesus coming to the tomb, to the graveside of Lazarus. Why? I mean, he comes in there and cries about somebody he knows he's going to raise.
felt it.
He knows how the story's going. Why are you crying, Jesus? Mary's crying because she thinks her brother's gone. Martha's crying because you were not there. You come in the room with these people that are crying and you sit with them and you cry with them. Oh, that I may know him in the fellowship of his suffering. There's a fellowship, a koinonia, a camaraderie that happens when you walk in a room with people that are weeping and you dare to weep with them. We have fellowship. We drink from the same cup together. When we have fellowship in the suffering and we know that we are not alone. And I wrote this book because in my pocket, I think my cell phone's in my pocket, I've got 4 million people following me on Instagram alone. I've never had 40 million people following me around. That's not even to mention Facebook and Twitter, 4 million, and not to mention any of them. I can take a picture of us and 4 million people see it right now. Right now. Never had that in my life. That doesn't stop loneliness at all. Mm-mm. So we have all of these things that suggest intimacy, but deny intimacy. And it seems like the more people we bring in, the more we're left out. And the worst part about crushing is to be alone, you know? Yeah. And I wrote about crushing because people are worried. People are going off the edge. Yeah. I got a call the other night from a young man who told me that his granddaughter hung herself in her boyfriend's front yard on a tree. Jesus. You think that all of this fear and isolation and bad news didn't play into that on top of personal problems in life? Overwhelmed. And I think that crushing was meant to be a guide through the wilderness.
Let's take a subject like divorce.
Yes.
That is a crushing.
Yes.
Some people can move on, find somebody new, and live happily with this new person. Another person can be bitter, angry, ugly, and die alone.
Right.
What did the one do right, and how can you be crushed and end up not turning into wine?
Oh, that's a good question. That's such a good question. I hope my answer will match it. What we must realize when we go through divorce is that we are not grieving over the person, we're grieving over what we had in mind.
Oh, oh, man.
Yeah. Out of 8 billion people in the world, there's nobody that could leave you, that would leave you so strung up that you'd spend 8 years in pain. It's not the person you can't get over. It's what you had in mind that you can't get over.
Oh, come on with it. My goodness.
And if we can let go of what we had in mind, we can discover what God had in mind for us. And the difference between the person who can't move forward and the person that can is how quickly we adapt to letting go of what we had in mind.
My goodness. My goodness.
Well, they say that the number one cause of divorce is
unmet
expectations.
Yeah.
As a man thinks, so is he. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he.
I thought it would be this way.
You know what's funny about that is? We have expectations of people that they never agreed to. A lot of times we grow up planning a wedding without a groom, and we're just looking for somebody to play a role in a script that we already wrote.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And a lot of times we say the same things, but we mean different things by them. I love you. You say I love you back. That doesn't mean we meant the same thing by I love you. My wife and I talk about going on vacation. And we both get excited. We're packing the bags. We're going on vacation. We're getting out of here. We feel like people on a runaway. We're laughing in the car. We're going on vacation. We're actually leaving. We're leaving. You know, we're so excited. The plane's going up in there. We're away. We're away. But when we get on vacation, I discovered that what I had in mind and what she had in mind was 2 different things. Evidently, you can relate to this. Evidently, you can relate to this. What I packed for and what I expected and what I was up for when we got on vacation was totally different for her. Her idea of a great vacation is not wearing makeup. You know, I don't have to get up at any particular time. I can sleep late. You know, so there she is in the bed. And there I am sitting at the bed, rolling my eyes at her thinking, I thought this was going to be a vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not a vacation. You could have stayed in the bed at the house. Okay, and I'm totally frustrated. Even though we use the same words, we
My
expected two different things.
My goodness.
And so when you start talking about disappointment begins with the expectation that wasn't communicated, and you brought me in to play a role that I never got to read the script.
My goodness.
And if I didn't sign off on the script, you have to forgive me if I don't play the role well. It takes you years to figure out what you meant by I love you and what I meant by I want you to be my wife. What wife means to me has something to do with what my mother showed me,
Yeah.
what I do or do not like about that. What wife means to me has a lot to do with what they were showing on TV during the time. It has changed in the last 20 years what it means to be a wife. So words don't ensure results because words require images. And I wish we could see pictures rather than words, because the pictures are true to the vision you have in mind, and the word always falls short of the vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Have you
Totally.
ever produced a movie at all? Have you ever done that? You've done a little bit of that. So you just fixed that one thing. The question was, let's use the example as a divorce. You know, you can do it right, you do it wrong. How do you do it right? You do it right by letting go of the fact you got to separate the person that left you with the preconceived idea that you had in your mind. And as soon as you can separate those two, you can move on. Someone that's stuck in bitterness. Let's do a hard one, the loss of a child. You've got somebody stuck and they're just bitter and angry at everyone and everything. What do you say to them?
First of all, I've never lost a child. I won't say that I have. I grieve with you. I cannot imagine the inextricable pain that you must be going through. I respect that pain. I love my children. I cannot imagine one moment breathing. I would be so disappointed if I outlived them. And my condolences to you. But I also want you to manage that with the reality that somebody never had a child at all. Never got to put a diaper on them, never got to burp them, never got to hear them say mama, never got to take a picture of their first step. And even though you didn't get to have them as long as what you had in mind, or see all the great moments in front of them that you never got to see, at least you got to touch them and to smell them and to hold them and to have them and to know them. And for those brief moments that they were in the world, you made their world the world it was. And if you're a Christian, you'll see them again. Until then, may the memories and the moments and the loving and the touching and the laughing and the stumbling and the toys left in the floor be the friends that comfort you, because you are an exceptional woman or man to have had an experience that other women are praying for and have never had a child at all.
There could be somebody that is thinking, all these politicians that are telling me what to do and how to do and all this, and they are so angry and put off. And how do we get out of that to become wine instead of just crushed grapes?
You know, I had back surgery several years ago. Between L4 and L5, they did a laminectomy, cut into my spine 4 inches deep. It was weeks before I could walk, and even then it was hard. I never would have gone to the mayor to ask him to do that surgery. I wouldn't have gone to my senator or even my president and asked him to operate on my spine. If we let the people who are good at what they do what they do and respect them for what they do, without allowing other people to get into a conversation who are not qualified to have an opinion, everything would be so much simpler.
My goodness.
when it comes to our health and our well-being, we don't go to our barber when our tooth is hurting. If we can get things in the right column and stop allowing people to sell us beachfront property in Arizona, and just go to the people who do what they do, and they're not perfect, and they're not always right, and they don't always have it together, but of what we got to work with, if I'm gonna have a tooth pull, I'd like for you to be a dentist.
Yeah.
As simple as a tooth. And if I'm gonna get my hair cut, I'd like for you to be a barber. In the absence of truth, you remember, I can't remember what you call them, but in geometry class when we were like in junior high school, those little metal things you put down and you draw a circle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. The whole, you could make the circle large or small. The most important thing wasn't the size of the circle, it was the steadiness of the point. If the point was right, the circle would definitely be right. You didn't have to be talented to make a circle if you got the point right. That point is truth. Truth holds us to a parameter that creates a circle that's safe. We have lost that truth of what is true. We don't believe in anything. We don't believe in anybody. We don't trust anyone. And if anybody says anything, then there's somebody who comes up and retaliates with some propaganda to create a myth that moves the point, and the circle is broken. We've got to get back to a few absolute truths that have nothing to do with being Democrat or Republican or millennial or boomer or black or white or 2 + 2 is 4 in Africa, in Saigon, in Italy, in Canada. Truth is absolute. That's why when Jesus came, the Bible said we beheld the wonder of his glory, the only begotten of the Father, full of truth and grace. If you don't have a truth, then you can't have a grace. And so I think what we really need today is to get away from all the noise of all the people who are campaigning for us to pick a side. And instead of siding with which one of them we're going to go with, we need to make them side with us and get a truth that we dig down in the ground and say, this is true, this is solid, and everything else that's going to go around it is going to go around this truth that I find to be an absolute in my life.
Crushing T.D. Jakes is prophetic.
Yeah.
It is a prophetically timed book. It is in its season. It is in the right season. And when you use all the analogy of this kind of grapes and wine, by the way, do you have a little glass of wine every once in a while?
When I'm trying to go to sleep,
So
that's
okay.
all it does to me is make me sleepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you and Sarita and Laurie and I had dinner one time with Colin Powell, General Colin Powell, way back in the day, and I was just making sure, that you didn't order wine and all that kind of.
No.
Let's make wine.
No, let's have a sparkling water with a lime.
No one thinks how much blood it costs.
Yeah. That phrase means a whole lot to me because even in the cost of being you, no one thinks of how much blood it costs. Your grandkids will grab your legs, your wife will hold your arms, and nobody will know what it costs you to be the hand they held. Nobody knows the blood it costs to be who we are. Whether you're Mother Teresa or Annie Lee Johnson, it costs you something to be there for anybody. It costs you something to be the woman you are, and nobody knows what it costs. And so you'll always be judged and undervalued and underappreciated by those trolls who hit you up on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and say the most ridiculous things out of jealousy or envy and strife, and they don't know that they're writing from one sufferer to another one. It costs all of us something. Not just the successful, the downtrodden, the person the single mother who's got 3 kids and left alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, and you're working 2 jobs, making minimum wage. Nobody knows that you're standing there smiling at a checkout counter and your feet are hurting, your back is aching, and your kids are waiting on you when you get home and you are tired and exhausted and at the end of your rope. The person who goes and treats person after person and walks up and down the aisles in the hospital, medicating not just the nice, but the mean people and the rude people and the obnoxious people. And that you're putting your life in danger for somebody who doesn't even seem to appreciate you. Nobody knows the blood that it costs for you to be who you are. And when I write to crushing, I write to every person who ever gave up some of themselves for somebody else. And nobody ever even recognized, no awards, no trophies, no Grammys, no Emmys, no Pulitzers, no New York Times feature. Only God knows how much you were crushed to make the wine you have become. But when I smell it and when I taste it, I can know that it's been through something. And experience cannot be faked. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
Feels like there is a truth that I'm seeing clearer because of this, that God is looking for, or let's say it this way, how do you know you have faith until it's called upon?
I'm laughing, you're in my Bible class. You're in my Bible class. You know what? Oh my God, I'm going crazy right now. I'm going crazy right over here in this chair in front of God and everybody. Because I just taught a Bible class about faith and fear and how they work together and how Christians take the scripture, God has not given us the spirit of fear, to mean that God has not given us fear. Fear is a favor if you're in the jungle.
There it is.
Fear is a favor if you're standing on the edge of a cliff. Fear is a favor if you're about to dive into the ocean. The fear warns you of what is wise and not wise. It's an emotion that we need. Faith operates in spite of fear.
Yeah.
People who have faith don't have faith because they have no fear, but the faith rises up and takes the wheel of the car and says, fear, get in the back seat. We're going somewhere.
Come on now.
You know what I'm saying? And when you brought that up, it was such, excuse me, y'all, I'm having a moment over here because he just gave me such confirmation to my Bible class, because what got me was, through faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not yet seen, moved with fear. Through faith and yet moved with fear, faith, fear, faith, fear. And I started debating that in my head.
Come on now.
And I just taught a Bible class about it. People think your life is a straight line. It's not a straight line up, it's not a straight line down. It's curves and twists and rocks and ridges and branches you swung across and creeks you got wet in to get to where you are. It's never just a smooth ride without dents and cracks and discrepancies and dysfunctions along the way. I never will forget when I had the final meeting with my doctors and my mother was dying of Alzheimer's. And we had to make a decision to disconnect her from life support. And I listened to all of that they said. And when I finally made the decision, my son looked at me and he said, "Oh, Daddy," he said, "you're so strong." And I swear, I have never felt so weak in all my life. What comes across to other people as strength only looks like strength because they don't see the bleeding that goes on in your soul. And I would bleed the next 20 years of my life. The next 20 years of my life, at a moment that he's looking up at me just thinking, I'm the Hulk or somebody like that. Faith rises up in spite of feelings, and it does what it has to do, and it responds to life however life goes at it. And you don't get to pick what goes at you. You just have to respond the best way you can and make it through this world. I wrote Crushing that we might have fellowship. My sister says Christianity is telling one beggar where another beggar found the bread. And I wrote Crushing to every person who's ever suffered anything, anytime, anywhere in your life, even if it wasn't physical, even if it was emotional, even if it was psychological, even if it was attitudinal, even if it was ministerial. I wrote crushing to say, I feel you, I got you, I understand that, but there is gonna be something beyond that. That if you put your time in, as the old folks said, payday's coming after a while. Yeah.
I heard a definition of loving God with all your heart is dwelling on His love for you and us. Mm-hmm. Inside of a crushing, shouldn't we just dwell on God's love, knowing He loves us, He's really for us?
Yeah.
And this crushing,
Yeah.
okay, talk to us a little bit about
it. You hit it. I was going through one of the worst moments of my life, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out, and I didn't know if I was going to turn out. But the thing that brought me through was something that you just said. I told God, I said, I know that you are for me. I know that you are for me. And if you allowed this to happen to me in some kind of way, it's going to make me better. And I don't like it. And I can't control it. And it hurts like something I cannot believe. But I trust you that you are for me. And you would never let anything happen to me that it wasn't ultimately going to work out for my good. What you're talking about is knowing God's ways better than you know His acts. To know that He is for you gives you staying power when you question what He did to you. It's like a parent who punishes a child and then takes them out for ice cream. You know what I'm saying? To have the blessed assurance. Oh.
Thank you, Lord.
Yeah. Woo. To have the blessed assurance that He is for you, and that He that hath began a good work in you shall perform it unto the day of Jesus Christ. That's that kind of, real church doesn't happen at church. I mean, I'm a pastor. I believe in going to church. I love it. It's wonderful. I'd rather preach than eat when I'm hungry. But real church plays out while you're washing dishes, or while you're washing the car, or driving down the road, or you're walking around in the backyard, or you're in the bathtub. Real faith is perfected in private places where you and God alone are left someplace like Jacob, wrestling to know Him better than you were before, and wrestling to know yourself. And God tell you something about yourself that you didn't know. There is nothing as precious as when God tells you, you're not Jacob, but you're Israel. You're not down, but you're up. You're not stupid, but you're wise. Whenever God tells you something about yourself that helps you get through this world a little bit better, that's church.
That's treasure.
Oh, yes.
Seal this beautiful word on our audience as we go out today.
The Bible says that Jesus saw the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and that He walked a 7-mile stretch with them. And over the period of a 7-mile stretch, He opened up all of the Old Testament shadows and types of who He was. If you know anything about your Bible at all, there are so many shadows and types in the Old Testament that He could have walked 70 miles. But in 7 miles, Jesus explained Himself through the major prophets and minor prophets and books of poetry and books of history. And then when they got to the house and they got ready to go in, the Bible said He made as if He would go further, and they stopped Him. Because when God starts talking, you don't want Him to leave. And they invited Him to come in the house. And as they sat around the table with Him, the Bible said He took bread and lifted up and broke it. And suddenly what they did not see on the road and what they did not see in the sermon, they saw in the order of the breaking of bread. There's something about the breakings in our lives that causes us to see God in a way that we would never otherwise see Him. There's as much difference between a person who's praising God because the music is nice and a person who's praising God because they've been broken as night and day. Somehow when he took that bread in his hand and he broke it, in the breaking of the bread, the process of breaking, they saw God. My prayer for you is that you would get a revelation of
Thank you,
God
Lord.
in the breaking of your life, in the cracking of places that you thought would always be there for you, that you would see something about God that you never saw before, and that you would recognize that you are not at the table alone, but he sits with you, and he manages the crushing moments in your life. He knows when you've had enough, and he knows how to stop the bleeding. So right where you are, if you just trust it and give him the praise. I've got a feeling that everything is going to be all right.